There we go. So happy Tuesday, everybody. We were just talking before we started of what day is it? Not really sure here, but it's all becomes a blur as we go through the summer here. But hi, my name is Sharon Goodson, and I work with the Leech Tag Foundation. And today's workshop is part of our curriculum with San Diego Gives. I don't know if all of you are participating in San Diego Gives because we had a lot of interest in our workshops from people outside of that too. So have welcomed some other folks as well. But for today, I'm very happy to have very good friend and colleague with us presenting Jack Alato. Jack and I have worked together for a while, and he is a trainer with the Fundraising Academy at National University, which you'll be hearing a lot more about too. And we're also joined by Sarah Wu, who also works for Fundraising Academy at National University. And I am going to turn it over to them. Just so you know, we will share the recording and the slides after today's session with you all by email, and then we will also post on the San Diego Gives University website page. So I will mute myself and turn it over to Jack and Sarah.
So Sarah, I think you're going to introduce our academy, but before we start, I want to acknowledge Faith Martin, the newest member of our team. Yes.
So welcome, Faith.
Yes,
we're so happy that you're here with us.
Yes, and good to see you. Okay, take it away, Sarah.
All right. As Jack has mentioned and so wonderfully congratulated our newest member to the team, we are here with Fundraising Academy. So Fundraising Academy is a program out of National University, and we are here to help emerging fundraising leaders like yourselves all learn the basics of relationship building and fundraising. Jack Alato is our talented trainer here today, who knows all things about, he's going to talk to you about the cause selling cycle and numbers 6 through 10 of our epic fundraising fail series. So Fundraising Academy, I will pop the link in the chat to our website, but we also offer a national online cause selling cohort where we have specific training on fundraising. It's a 10-week cohort that you can check out yourself, but Jack's going to tell you more about the great things that Fundraising Academy can offer in our curriculum by leading us into numbers 6 through 10 of epic fundraising fail. There you go, Jack.
So I like to always start this, as you know, Sarah, by saying, yes, I have committed all 10 of these fundraising fails. Not only these 10, but probably another 100. I often thought I would write a book, Epic Fundraising Fails, but I don't think I would have enough time to list all of my own personal epic fundraising fails before I leave the planet. So I'm going to wait on that book and see what happens. There are 3 things that we want to do, and I do urge you to go back, download that other webinar from the first 5 and check it out. And definitely, hopefully, you'll see some of the things and some of the resources that we say you could use to overcome those fails, which I think are really important. Today, we're going to explore 5 additional epic fails and the key contributors to them. And definitely, we want to give you some mechanisms to avoid them. Here's the thing about epic fails. Epic fails are hidden opportunities. If I never failed in anything, I wouldn't be here today because I'd be so wildly successful, or I would not realize that I have committed epic fails. So these are hidden opportunities. Every single epic fail, and I'm going to give you some example of my own, I've learned from, and they were opportunities for me to grow in the fundraising profession, but also not to repeat them. And then finally, develop some tools from the cause selling cycle that will help you strengthen your fundraising practice. So I'm going to invite you guys as we move along, and Sarah's going to monitor it for me, is to put in chat any epic fails that you would like to share with the group. You could do it anonymously, or you could just send a message directly to Sarah if you don't want your name on there. But I'd like to hear some epic fundraising fails that you may have committed as we move along, and definitely tell us about them. So let's start with the cause selling cycle. I hate to be repetitive from last week, but I'm going to be repetitive. Remember, there are 3 distinct phases in the cause selling cycle. That first phase is prospecting and the pre-approach. And this is all the work that is necessary to prospect for qualified donors. So definitely you want to do that first. If not, you're not going to be able to move through the cycle. That would be a fail, definitely. Phase 2, which is all of those orange like 3 through 6 parts of this cause selling cycle, are all the things that happen face to face. This is where you are with your prospective donors. And then the third phase, it includes everything after the gift is given. So this is, and then the circle starts all up again. You know, I love this last phase, stewardship. Sarah, one of the things I just read in a great book that I was reading by the great Simone Schroyer is that after a person makes a gift and we steward that gift, they become a prospect for the next gift. That's why this cycle is so beautiful, that you just start over, even with the previous donors, in prospecting about helping them to make another gift. So starting with our first epic fail of today is number 6, which is not discovering the donor's interests, values, and motives for making a gift. So great fundraisers know that need discovery is a fundamental building block in fundraising. Need discovery is the thing that helps us build relationships with our prospects and our donors. While initial research, you may have some initial research that reveals that a prospect donor is a good match for your nonprofit, it isn't until you immerse yourself in discovering their needs, their values, their passions, why they are here, their interests, etc., that you truly get to know that prospect and their ability and inclination to make a gift. So we don't want to skip this step. When we skip this step of understanding these various things, then we have created an epic fail. One of the things that I did in my own career that is really important is not discovering interest. Now, I think I told you guys last week, and for those of you who don't know me, the majority of my career was spent in healthcare philanthropy. So we had all these different lines of service in our hospital, and people would call up and they might say, hey, I'm interested in oncology, I'm interested in women's health, or I'm interested in behavioral health. Here's the operative word in all those things. It's interest, interest. So discovery, once they tell me what their interest was, discovery involves asking donors questions about their giving interests. If they called up and they said, I'm interested in women's health, I would ask them, well, what specifically are you interested about women's health? Is it our prenatal care? Is it our birthing center? Is it our mammography or oncology as it relates to women's health? What specifically are you interested in? So discovery in our cause selling cycle is discovering what their giving interest is, what their motivations are, and then what is their capacity. How do we discover those things? We ask them questions and then we listen. One of the things we say in cause selling is you don't ask your way into a gift. You listen your way into a gift. And this is really an important point. So once we start asking those questions, we have to start listening. Most donors enjoy sharing their stories. In fact, research shows that sharing experiences with others makes people feel connected to one another and it enhances their sense of well-being. If you want to make the most out of your discovery process, create a questioning strategy. Remember this, the best questions are ones that help you do 4 things. One, they help you discover the donors' primary motivations for giving. So for example, if someone called up and said, I'm interested in women's health, and I asked them the question, what specifically about women's health are you interested in? They might say to me, I'm interested in your birthing center because I plan on getting pregnant. So I want to know more about what you are doing with your women's health center. That's about motivations. Their answers to that is about their motivation. They are specifically interested in using the hospital facility as a place to deliver their children. Number two is you confirm the donor has an interest in your organization's work and considers it important. So I might say to that person who calls, I might say to him or her, in our birthing center, we also care about prenatal nutrition. And we're going to give you some tools that will help you make sure that you are having a healthy pregnancy. So that might be their interest. They might say, that's really important to me. I'm really interested because, I only eat unhealthy food. And now that I want to get pregnant, I want to change my lifestyle and my eating habits. That's where we can confirm a specific interest about them. Number three is build rapport. And I hope this example I'm giving you shows how I'm trying to build rapport with that individual, that prospective donor, that woman or that man who's interested in having a baby in our birthing center. And when you build rapport, you do something that's really important, guys. And I've been thinking a lot about this. It's fostering trust with your donor. I'm building that rapport and I'm fostering trust. And number four, ensure that you are talking with the person who has an authority to make a funding decision. Now, you might not be doing that right at this point, but down the road, I may be working with that prospective donor, and I want to find out that they have the authority, that they are capable of making a funding decision. And I want to tell you, this has been an epic fail of mine over and over and over again. That's where I sit down with Faith and I say to Faith, are you interested in making a gift? How about making a gift of $1,000 to our hospital? And she says, oh, I have to talk to my partner or my husband or my wife before I can make a decision. That's an epic fail I've done over and over again. And I always wanted to say to myself, why didn't you find out before you asked her whether she has the capability to make it? Sometimes they say, I have to talk to my children if they're an older adult. So number four is to ensure that you're talking to the right person who has the authority to make a gifting decision. Now that you know the overall goals of a questioning strategy, and there are lots in our cohort, which hopefully, Sarah, you'll put our next cohort dates in there. We do a whole bunch of stuff around questioning, how to ask open-ended questions, etc. Here's a strategy that, again, I failed at in the past. The first thing you do to create that questioning strategy is to draft your questions before the meeting. With that person who called me up and asked about our women's health center, I wouldn't be writing questions about, well, I'll talk to her about cardiology. That would be a fail. I'm going to draft questions specifically geared to her specific interest or his specific interest. So draft your questions before you even meet with them. And when you don't do that, you may commit an epic fail and you may not look as having put together what you need to do. Number two, explain what you hope to accomplish during the conversation. I might say to Faith, I am interested in finding out more about what you are interested in our women's health center. I want to hear what your opinion is, what you've heard about our women's health center, why you chose to call us, or are you talking to a variety of hospitals about your future? So all of those things are telling her point blank what you hope to accomplish. Now, here's an epic fail that I've committed and other people have committed with me. Don't invite somebody out to do something, and then when you get there, surprise them with some questioning strategy. That's why you want to plan it out. I remember once I was invited to have lunch in the Ferry Building of all places in San Francisco by a woman who I thought was a friend of mine. And she never told me. I just thought we were going to have this social, casual lunch in the Ferry Building. And all of a sudden, halfway through, she asked me if I would be interested in introducing her to one of my major donors. And I wish she had told me that that was what she really wanted from me before she invited me to lunch. Because truthfully, I would have said to her point blank, I'd love to have lunch with you, but I necessarily do not want to talk about our donors because that's confidential. So make sure you tell them what you hope to accomplish from the meeting before you even visit with them. Remember number 3, and you're going to get this in the minutes, and certainly you can go back and look at this video, is ask questions that are clear and open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are one of the most valuable tools we have in our arsenal as fundraisers. Asking questions and then listening. Open-ended questions enable that person who you're speaking with to give you a whole bunch of insight about what you're interested in. If I ask an open-ended question about a prospective donor and say, hey, what about our Women's Health Center are you interested in? Then they could talk about a whole bunch of things. I'm interested in this, I'm interested in that. And then I am recording all that and knowing that those open-ended questions have enabled me to help build that relationship, which is at the cornerstone of our cost-selling cycle, and also enable me to really drill down to what my future conversations are going to be. Here's an epic fail that I did in stewardship. Faith calls me up. She makes a gift of $1,000 to the Women's Health Center. And I actually did this. And I send her a letter and say, Faith, thank you for your gift to our cardiology program. And then Faith gets on the phone and says, Jack, I did not make a gift to your cardiology program. I made a gift to Women's Health. That phone call actually happened in my career. What a fail. So what did I do to recover from that? I said, oh, Faith, I'm so sorry. I will definitely move that money to Women's Health. And I do apologize for that. And then I followed up a couple weeks later, said, Faith, here is the impact of your gift on women's health to keep that relation. And that's a fail that I hate to admit this, Sarah, but I think I've done it more than once. And it's something that you have to try to recover from. Remember, by understanding the purpose of a questioning strategy and ways to put such a strategy into practice, you can make a plan for an effective, time-efficient discovery process. That's what I want to do. Okay, the powers of our brains. Okay, there are psychological influences and there are sociological influences. So let me put those all up here. Our brains are amazing, absolutely amazing. They're designed to synthesize our conscious experiences of the external world. This means that in some ways, we do not experience the world, but rather we experience the version of the world that our brains have created. In short, you've heard this before, perception is reality. If you aren't convinced of this, there are a couple examples, but I'm just going to give you one. Steve Jobs, you know that guy who's now deceased, started Apple, and he said, look at these little phones that we have. I want to convince you that these phones are really something you need. And we began paying a lot more money for something that does a similar job. For example, a lot of people went and bought their phones because they can now take a photo with their phone, or they could go on the internet. So here is perception. How about those? I remember when I lived in Boise, Idaho, and I remember when Starbucks first came to town and they opened their first store and they were charging $1.50, I think it was, for a latte. Now I think it's like 27 bucks or something outrageous. And what did the founder of Starbucks do? They convinced me that it was socially acceptable and even trendy to spend $9 or $29 for a cup of coffee. Think about it. It would cost you like 10 cents to make it at home. What we see and hear becomes acceptable and eventually becomes truth. That's what those two great marketing companies did, Apple and Starbucks. They eventually convinced us that it was socially acceptable to pay a lot more money for something that would be much less expensive. Sarah, I hope you're looking at chat, and definitely interrupt me. I should have said this before if you need to.
Yeah,
When
we're
we
all
see,
good. We're all good, Jack. I wanted to just put one little note in here for the audience. Yes, you're so welcome to DM me privately if you have an epic fail of your own that you want to share. So Jack is the only one sharing epic fails. But wanted to also say on that the power of our brains, right? And how we're talking about how this ties into discovering the donor's interest. The donor's reality is that their perception is the reality. So Jack's
Right.
going to go a little bit more into that and how we all perceive situations, right? And your donors perceive situations too, just how Faith may have perceived a situation in which her gift was perhaps not being allocated in the way she had initially expected. Her
Yep.
reality is that she needs a follow-up from Jack. And so that is how he really handled that epic fail.
Yes, good example. And I think just adding to that is we perceive situation according to our own personal needs, our values, our expectations, and our past experience and training. Absolutely. This is why a person's individual mood, attitude, and self-image all factor into what we see as indisputable certainties. I mean, I have had meetings with donors or prospective donors who are having a bad day. Maybe they couldn't get their kids' lunch made in time to drop them off at school, or their husband was slow, or they couldn't get into the shower in time to make their own. So all of those things play into, and we really should think about and see what's going on with them and be understanding and sympathetic to what they need.
Yeah. And I think making the donors' needs important, right? So I have something in the chat. Sharon says, my epic fail was asking for a gift that was important to me, but not the donor.
Oh
So
gosh, yes.
that's a great example, Sharon.
Well, I think I shared that I made that same epic fail many times. Last week when we talked about epic fails, I think I told you I lived in Boise, Idaho. The founder of Albertson Supermarket is in Boise, Idaho. I sent him a letter asking, Joe Albertson was his name. I send him a letter and say, hey, how about a $500 gift? I thought that was a great gift, Sharon. I really did. He saw me. I saw him again at an event, and he said, why did you only ask me for 500 bucks? Why didn't you ask me for 5,000 bucks? That was a meaningful gift for him. And when we fail to discover the capacity, et cetera, of our donors and how much they could give, then that's an epic fail. Here's the thing about asking for gifts, Sharon, and I don't know if this is your experience. It's never insulting to ask people for more money than they're capable of giving. I consider that a comment. What is insulting is asking them for way less than they're thinking of giving or they're capable of giving. That sometimes could be insulting to a donor. With Joe Albertson in my example, that's an insult. I kind of insulted him. But of course, I did go back to my office. I was just a volunteer. It was my first fundraising job, and write him a new letter immediately. Okay. So hopefully I recovered from. So let's discuss presentation style. What is your presentation style? You can put this in chat, guys. I'm going to talk about 3 presentation styles, and you really listen. Until I got to say this little secret. Before cause selling and my understanding of cause selling, I did not develop a presentation style. But in our module on presentation, we talk quite a bit about developing our presentation style. And actually, today's webinar is a result of me and my own presentation style. You see, I move my hands a lot. That's my ethnic background getting into motion here. So developing and rehearsing your presentation style before you meet is really important. And if you don't do it, it's gonna be a fail. Okay. So let's discuss a couple presentation styles that we talk about in cause selling. Once you know your prospects, you can set your goals for each future interaction with them, and you can plan your presentation. Your presentation will depend on how well you rehearse. When you rehearse your presentation, you allow your personality and the passion that you have for your cause to shine through. Now, in my example with Faith, and Faith, I am sorry about picking on you today. I know you're a brand new employee, but I just love the fact that I could call on you since you came to this webinar today and use you as an example. Now, if Faith called up and she said, "Hey, I'm interested in women's health. I'm interested in what you're doing for prenatal care," I can plan my presentation style. Knowing Faith, I know that she wants to see what we're doing. So I may call her up and I may say, "Faith, I want you to come to our Women's Health Center. We're doing this nutrition class for expectant moms. I want you to hear what's going on, what we're doing around prenatal care, nutrition, and things like that." Then the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a presentation, and that presentation is going to fall into either of three things. It could be a memorized presentation. You may want to memorize the presentation. I may memorize the presentation about prenatal care for my interaction with Faith when she comes to the hospital. But remember this, guys, if you sound robotic or like you're reading some script, Faith is smart enough to pick up on that. And she's going to say, "No, he rehearsed this, he memorized it." Don't do that. Every prospect will have different needs. Do not use the same memorized presentation for every prospect. If Sarah called me up and she says, "I'm interested in oncology," am I going to give her the memorized presentation that I created for Faith? Of course not. I may give her bits and pieces of the overall presentation about our hospital, our healthcare facility, what we're doing, but not the exact same presentation. So the first is memorized presentation. The second is an outline presentation. And I'll show you this on the next slide. An outline presentation is when you know what content will be presented and you are confident and knowledgeable enough so that the right words will be available as needed. And honestly, this is the presentation I like to do: an outline, key bullets, key words that I want to get across in my presentation to Faith on prenatal care. The third type of presentation, and I've failed at this too, guys, is the impromptu presentation. The impromptu presentation, it follows the same principles as other presentations, but those who use an impromptu approach have mastered the art of reading the prospects. Have you ever been at a fundraising gala, Sarah, where someone comes up to you and says, "Well, what is your organization doing with this?" And you're thinking, "Oh my God, I have no idea what my organization is doing that." But you have to give that impromptu presentation. And I'm sure it's happened to many of you. I've been to galas where people who I had no idea who they were during a capital campaign, and they would come up to me and say, "Why do you need a new hospital? What about more emergency room bays? Why do you need more emergency room bays?" And then I'm giving this impromptu presentation on the need for a new hospital. So remember, there are three types: the memorized, the outline, and the impromptu. Please tell us in chat which kind of presentation works best for you and why. Okay, so remember
Give
with
that a little time too. So I'm going to put that in the chat too for those who are more visual learners. We are asking you if you feel comfortable to share, if you feel most comfortable in a memorized outlined or impromptu presentation style?
And remember, the epic fail here is not developing and rehearsing a presentation style, which trust me, I'm going to tell you another story. I wrote a grant early in my career for $40,000 in equipment. And the program officer from the foundation was coming to town. And I said to her, well, why don't we get together? You're not here that much. And I went to this meeting. I remember we were in the lobby of the hotel. And I said to her, well, I wanted to know if you have any questions. And you know what she said to me? You mean to tell me, Jack, that the only reason why you called this meeting is to ask me if I have questions? You know, why did you call this meeting? Why are you wasting my time? She actually said that to me. Jack, why are you wasting my time today? If I had questions, I would have called you or written you a note. So remember that if I had rehearsed it, I could have said to her, well, maybe I want to show you this. But I was totally flabbergasted because I was ill prepared with any presentation.
I love that. Actually, that's a great point, Jack, that in all three of these presentation styles that Jack has shared, you'll notice that each type is still strategically planned. So in a memorized presentation, although it should not sound robotic, it is something that you could take the time to internalize by practicing your memorized presentation, planning out portions of what you will say to a donor. In the second presentation style, in outlined, this technique, you don't plan your exact words. You have your key bullets. I'm seeing some in the chat. I think outlined is a really popular presentation style because it allows you to be confident and knowledgeable with the information, but also gives you some room to channel whatever type of donor you're trying to communicate with. And then in the third type of presentation style, impromptu, although it is kind of with our little icon there, something that you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants and you're sort of coming up with things as you know it. This type of presentation style is still something that you can practice. It's still a strategic way to present. So it's something to think about for all different kinds of communicators. So actually, Jack, I've got some folks in the chat that are sharing their presentation style and why. So keep on coming with the share in chat.
Yeah,
Danielle
definitely
says that their presentation style is outlined because it allows some flexibility for pre-planning and some reading the room, so to speak. I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's see. Sharon also says outlined is her presentation style with some parts memorized. So there's even a little bit from style number one, such as budget sizes and organization history. That's great. You want to be a knowledgeable fundraiser for your cause.
I'm going to give another example of a presentation. I worked for St. Francis Medical Center in Los Angeles. Love the hospital, still there, great hospital. And it was early in my career. I was a grant manager and writer and corporate, I did corporations and foundations. And we were going to have a site visit from the Amundsen Foundation, very famous foundation in Southern California. I love the foundation. And I remember my supervisor at the time said, Jack, our presentation to this program officer is going to be about a cardio cath lab. And it's a cardiology unit where people who have blockage, they could get a stent put in or whatever they need. Okay. So as we're touring, and actually she said, I think that we should ask for about $500,000 to put this new cardio cath lab in. So I had my presentation. It was beautiful. I'm going to tell you, it was one of the most beautiful presentations I had ever put together. And as we're walking through the hospital, the program officer, we toured this program officer through the hospital, and we went to the neonatal intensive care unit, which was staffed by the head of that was this fabulous physician who knew how to talk to everyone about these very vulnerable babies in the neonatal intensive care unit. Well, soon as he started talking, I said to myself, I'm dead. My presentation is history. because he was so articulate about why this unit was so important for these critically unhealthy babies. And by the time we walked through, the program officer said to me, I'm no longer interested in the cardio cath lab. I'm interested in supporting his work with vulnerable babies. And it's one of those things, guys, and I'm sure it's going to happen in your career where you have to quickly pivot to a different presentation. Now, I mean, here's a multi use hospital, not only neonatal intensive care, but women's health, oncology, behavioral health, all this kind of thing. So I didn't have presentations for every one of those things. But I remember he left and I quickly went back to my office and I wrote another case for support, a presentation for the neonatal intensive care unit. And we got an $800,000 gift as a result of that. So sometimes, now I could have kept saying it, but don't you want to support the cardio cath lab for $500,000? No, you don't want to do that. You want to be able to pivot and be donor centric, customer centric, and go to where they're going. Thanks. You know, this icon, this impromptu, I think we should put a little thought bubble above his head or her head that says, woohoo, because he looks so happy there. Okay, let's go on to number 8. Any questions? Please put them in chat. Sarah's going to interrupt me. She's happy to. So developing a positive attitude towards donor objections. Now, here is something that we all get, which are objections. And I could give you another 1,000 objections I've heard over the course of my career in healthcare, philanthropy, and social services, whatever it is. So the most feared part of any presentation, even one that is outlined like most of you said you do, is handling objections. Think back on some of the objections you've received. What were they? Put them in chat. So you do this beautiful presentation. I do this beautiful presentation about women's health, and Faith is all on board with that. And she says to me, but Jack, I've heard that some people were not cared for to the best, that this other hospital might be better for a place for you to deliver your baby. So what we're saying here is objections are not to be feared. What she's doing by offering that objection is she's showing me a sign of interest. She wants me to handle that objection. And so this fail here is not having a positive attitude towards her objection. Remember this, if it was so obvious to every donor why they should give to your cause freely and without hesitation, guess what? We wouldn't be needed as fundraisers. There would be no need for a fundraiser if everyone immediately saw the importance of your cause and had no objections. As we move into a discussion of how to handle objections from your soon-to-be donor, let's look at it as for what it is, which is a positive occurrence. Objections are positive occurrence. When she tells me she has some objection to something in my presentation, that's a positive occurrence. Objections, here's the problem with the word objections. It's a clash in our minds. It seems like there's a clash between us and the prospect. When Faith offers her objection, it's not a clash between us. It's not where someone wins and someone loses. However, what many people fail to understand is hearing the word no and hearing an objection is not the same thing. No is a different response than hearing an objections. Remember this, objections move prospects nearer to the gift and it uncovers their concerns. When Faith gives me an objection about, our birthing center or whatever, she's telling me a concern. What's my job? To address that concern and answer her objection as best I can. When she gives me an objection, it's the key for me to know that I am going to get at a successful ask for a gift when I answer her objection to her satisfaction. So important, guys. Remember, welcome objections. They're verbal and they're nonverbal signals of interest that give you the chance to discover what the prospect is really thinking. When you hear an objection from donors, recognize that objections are a normal and natural part of every conversation. An objection can be anything the donor says or does that present an obstacle to a successful completion of the ask. Okay? Donor objections can be both emotional and logical. Your first task in answering an objection is to calm the prospect's emotion by proving that you are open to reason. If Faith told me that I've heard that some women were not treated well in your birthing center, I would say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Can you give me any specific examples? I would like to look into this. I remember once, not at that hospital, but another hospital in Northern California, someone came to me. I used to do these rounds with the chief nurse exec, and someone came to her. We were sitting in a room and said, I don't like the fact that my dad is not being treated to the extent that I think. Answering that objection, answering that concern, exploring what had happened, what's going on, is such a way to get to a gift. I remember sending out donor letters at various hospitals that I worked with, and people would call me up and say, why are you sending me a donor letter? My husband or my wife passed at your hospital. I wouldn't say, oh my gosh, and hang up on them. I would say, let me find out what happened. Give me your name. Give me your phone number. Let me see what I could get. And honestly, I would always find a nurse who would be willing to call them back and talk about that specific case. That's more than an objection. It's very emotional, but it's also very rational. They want to know what happened to their loved one. When your donor objects, try to understand as to what type of a resistance is being offered. Typically, donor resistance falls into 4 categories, and I'm going to go through those. The first is a stall. And this is when your donor puts off deciding about a gift. I asked Faith for $1,000 and she says, oh, I need to talk to other people or I need to think about it. She's kind of stalling me, okay? What do? What do you do when you hear a stall? You ask more questions and genuinely care about their responses. Uncover their concerns. If she says, I need to think about it, ask her, is there anything that is of concern to you in making this gift? Focus on the relationship that you have with her, building that relationship further rather than getting a gift. This is such an important point. I'm going to repeat it. Build that relationship rather than trying to get her to make a gift. Keep building. The second type of objection that you might hear is the searcher. This is a process who objects to making a gift by simply asking for more information. Guys, I can't tell you the number of times I've sat with a donor and I'm asking them for a gift and they keep saying, well, what about this? Or what about that? It's the what about objection. You know, they're searching for a reason why they want to make a gift. When you get this type of objection, they're asking for more information. Keep engaging them in conversation. Keep trying to figure out what their real concern is. Another type of objection is the hidden objection from a donor. And let me tell you guys, it could be very difficult to identify that hidden objection. It might be the amount of the gift, as Sharon indicated earlier. It could be the fact that I'm asking them, maybe they don't like me. It's hard to believe that anyone would not like me. Who wouldn't like me? I've always had this fail. When someone doesn't like me, I'm always thinking, what's wrong with this person that they don't like me? but it could be me. It could be my style of talking. It could be the way I ask for a gift. It might be me. It might be the amount, me. It might be for the cause. If Sharon says if Faith says she's only interested in the birthing center and I'm talking to her about cardiology, then I am failing at what I should be doing. I haven't identified the hidden objection. She's probably saying, I told this guy I'm interested in women's health and he's talking to me about cardiology. This guy ain't right. Okay. So that happens too. It's that those things, it's hard to believe that any of those things would happen with me, but honestly, they have. The fourth type of objection is when the donor objects to something and you cannot find a solution. This is what we call stopper resistance. When you get a stopper and like there's no way you can answer this objection, like it might be something like, I don't know, I don't like the look of this building. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not going to be able to change that. Or I don't like this room is too small in your hospital for patients. That's a stopper. You're encountering resistance. It's best to simply say, thank you for your time and move on to some other prospect. You know, those of you who have ever been on a boat and gone fishing or, fishing from the pier, catch and release. You catch the fish, but sometimes you got to release them because they're an endangered species or you can't eat them. It's the same true for prospects. You catch them, you work with them, you try to build a relationship, and you just can't successfully do that, so you release them. Okay? So one of the things that we say, and I'm going to repeat this, remember, attitude shift. An objection is not a battle to be won. It's a strong indication of interest. Redefine them as positive occurrences. Remember what I said earlier. If there weren't objections, there would be no need for fundraisers. Objections, when you answer objections, I'll tell you something. If you don't answer an objection adequately, you're going to lose that prospect because they're not going to move to making a gift. So objections, when answered and addressed, are relationship building tools, and they move prospects nearer to the gift. It moves them along that continuum to saying yes. And welcome these objections. They're so important. As I mentioned, there's 4. Remember these: the stall, the searcher, the hidden objection, that's the person who doesn't like me, and the stopper, where you cannot move on to making a gift and you release that individual. Number 9, adopting a closing frame of mind and dealing with rejection. So, okay, what is a closing frame of mind? So many fundraisers, and I've had this fail, you think that the only time you are successful is when you make that ask, and some fundraisers hate to get to there. In fact, I've seen statistics where fundraisers who fail at closing, they do everything right. They go through the cost selling cycle perfectly. Great presentation, great way of handling objections. But when they get to the ask, which is towards the end of that cycle, they dread trying, even though the ask is the primary reason for us being in the meeting with a prospective donor. If you have ever felt that way, you're not alone. Trust me, I've asked for some big gifts in my career, like $1 million, and I think, oh my God, did I do this right? I'm worried about this. How's it going to work? Are they going to say yes? I put a lot of work into this. All that leads to dread, anxiety, and fear. And I always like to quote Dune. Anybody who's seen the movie Dune or read the book, what do they say? Fear is the mind killer. And fear is one of the things that happens when we dread to make the ask. So what we say here is adopt a closing frame of mind. And look at it this way. You're closing the gift not only when you're asking, but way at the beginning when you're prospecting, when you're qualifying them, when you're discovering their needs, their interests, their values. You are closing the gift all throughout that cycle. so that when you get to the ask, you are so close to getting yes. I always like to say that if you follow this cost selling model as it moves around the cycle, by the time you get to the ask, that's the easiest thing. Because you know you've done all those other things right, you are gonna get to yes. And that's really important. As a successful fundraiser, as I said, you begin at the beginning and you are closing from prospecting. If you get to the ask and you have not gotten to yes after you've done everything, then you need to look at what happened prior. So I get to that point with Faith and I say, how about making a gift of $5,000? And she says, no. That's the end of that. It's not the end of the conversation. I have to go back and look, did I qualify her correctly? Did she have the capacity to make a $5,000 gift? Who else should have been in the room when I made that ask? What other needs, what interests or values or motivations did I not uncover earlier on in my relationship building with her? So you have to go back and look at what happened. When you are rejected, when you are told no, it should prompt you to study your performance to find out the insufficiencies. And of course, when you get to agreement throughout the fundraising process, the final step should be the easiest one. However, remember this, making a gift decision is difficult for most people. Donor hesitation is natural. Trust me, it's natural. Whether it's $1 million or $10 million or $25. Hesitation is natural. Your efforts should be to understand how the donor feels when they hesitate. Be patient and offer assistance. And it's not wrong for me to say, Faith, is the gift amount too large? Is the cause that I am asking you to support this not within your interest? Or whatever the questions may be, it's okay. I like to say asking and listening. After you ask those questions of your prospect, listen to their response. She may say, no, I think the gift amount is fine. And I say, well, does it fit within your interest? And she would say, well, I told you I'm interested in women's health and you're asking me to make a $5,000 gift to behavioral health. I'm not interested in that. When we uncover and listen to their responses, then we know what we did wrong and we could fix it. Remember to be mindful that closing a gift begins at the start of the fundraising process. When I first met with her, that's where it started. The close started way back then. Okay, have that mindset of a closing consciousness. As I said earlier, always be aware that you are closing. And the most important factor in successfully closing is your attitude. It's true about objections. Your attitude is so important. It's true about need discovery. It's true about presentation. It's true about prospect research. Whatever it is, your attitude is such an important component of this. Okay, so what are some reasons for failure to close? One is inadequate prospecting. She wasn't interested in this program. She didn't have the capacity for that. Incomplete qualifying of the prospect. I didn't go and qualify her. One of the things that we use in cost selling is qualifying prospects via the Madden test. And you could go to our learning portal and download a fabulous webinar. I didn't teach it, so it's fabulous to an extent, but you could do that. One of my colleagues who is probably better than me has some things about the Madden test as a way to qualify prospects. And a third thing is we fail to close because of insufficient need discovery. As a result, your presentations, when you do any of these three things incorrectly, what results from that? Your presentations focus on the wrong features of your organization, or you supply compelling or uninspiring evidence to support your claims for the work of your organization. When there are missteps in that cause-selling cycle, a prospect's failure to give does not automatically brand you as a poor closer. Rather, these rejections should prompt you to study your performance to find the insufficiencies. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard no in my career. I've heard it many times, never insulted by it. Just, I always looked at what happened and what did I do wrong. And as we talk about 10, you're going to see that in action. When you achieve agreement throughout the fundraising process, as I said, the final step should be the easiest one. So let's do a community share before we do 10. And how long have you, after you received a gift, do you send a thank you letter? Put that in chat or community share. What do you include in your thank you letter?
All right, let's give some time for our guests to share in the chat. I would love to know from your various organizations, how long after you receive a gift do you send a thank you letter as the fundraiser? And maybe some tips on what you include in the thank you. Maybe even as this is the theme of epic fails, what did you used to include in the thank you? Or maybe you can share with us how long you used to, after you received a gift, you sent a thank you letter. So we are more than happy to hear all of your responses from previous roles, or how you have improved, or how you do it now. We would love to know. All right. And I see also in the chat we're seeing some different numbers and some different whys. So Jack, I'm going to read out some of the responses. So Sharon's got, how long after you receive a gift do you send a thank you letter? Within 24 hours, or at least an email within 24 hours. I do think that's a really great tip, especially with the prevalence of email and how quickly we can reply to folks outside of physical mail. I got another response from Nancy who says, how long? Within 48 hours tops. Very good. And then we've got Ray responding too. How long after you receive a gift do you send a thank you letter? Ray says within 5 days to include a reaffirmation of the positive impact and benefit of their donation. I love the big why there, Ray, and you're going to lead us right into number 10. And then Sharon also mentions after that, within that 24-hour email, then follow with a letter a little longer. So we've got some different modalities that are being shared in the chat, Jack. Would love to know your community share, from emails to letters and the different time frames.
Yes, I'm going to give you an example. So before I went to JFK University and National University, I worked for Catholic Charities in the Bay Area. And every morning when I got to work, I would have a list of all of the people who made gifts via the website during the last 24 hours. So I would get a list. Faith Martin has made a $25 gift to Catholic Charities. Do you know what I did? I sent all of them the same email. And it's been a while since I worked at Catholic Charities, but in my mind, I still have that email. And this is what that email said. Dear Faith, thank you for your gift of $25 to advance the mission and programs of Catholic Charities, period. You will receive a more formal letter thanking you for your gift for IRS purposes, period. But I wanted to be the first to say thank you for making a gift. It's so important for us. Faith, if you have any questions about the programs or services of Catholic Charities, please feel free to email me at this email, or you can call me at 415-572-2530. Every single email, end it with that, and I would say thank you again, Jack Alato. I can't tell you the number of people who would call me and say, yes, I do have a question about your program, or yes, I am interested in learning more about this. What a beautiful way. They had made a gift over the last 24 hours and they immediately got a response from me thanking them for that gift and the importance of that gift in our organization's advancing our mission.
I love that example, Jack, because I think it shows the group here that not only is it important to send out thank you letters or send communications to donors quickly and efficiently, right? We're talking about, I saw a lot of the 24 hours, a lot within 48 hours, even within the week too, if you are in an organization that, you don't get that data quickly, to reaffirm that positive impact. And we also have Nancy sharing in the chat, we thank them for what they have given, acknowledge the length of the relationship, talk about the good that is done with their support. So I
Yeah,
love all of these community
yeah,
shares, these points that say, what can you include in the thank you? I hope that some of our group can take some of those suggestions into their work. And even Jack, I
yes.
love your example because you've included your contact information. How great is it if I'm a donor and then very quickly after my gift, someone responds, a person responded to me to tell me about acknowledging the gift that I made, and I have that person's contact information to say, you know what, I do have a question about your charity. I do
Yeah,
need a presentation on this XYZ area of service. The other thing I wanted to note too for our group, I come to the Fundraising Academy from a donor stewardship and donor relations career. And something I also wanted to note is what not to include in the thank you. I would even go here where it says, Jack has asked us to share in the community, what do you include in thank you? We have so many great examples, but something I would suggest not including is maybe a link to donate, because that doesn't make any sense. I've seen charities do that where in the acknowledgement, they say, thanks for your gift. Like, here's the link to give a
make
gift,
another.
which doesn't make any sense because they just gave you a gift. So we want to acknowledge
No,
all the good work that our donors are doing, and kind of keeping that separate from the ask, because this is a point to really thank them for the impact they're making on the community that your organization serves.
yeah, and Sarah, I see that all the time. We're all donors. Hopefully, we're all donors. You send and make a gift to some organization, small gift, $25, and I get a thank you letter acknowledging the gift. And at the bottom is a tear off to return another gift. And all of the research is consistent with what you just said, Sarah. Don't ask for another gift right away. It's just not a good idea. I keep thinking to myself, my gosh, have they even cashed my check yet before they're asking me for another gift? Or have they even processed the donation on their website before they're asking me for another gift? I'll tell you, I've worked with some organizations. I was on the board of a low income organization, and that executive director would send out a handwritten note as a stewardship
Wow.
technique. It's so beautifully done. And she just did it well. So now the 10th and final epic fail, it's not the final because trust me, there are many, is understanding the role that stewardship plays in retention, loyalty, and attrition. Do you know what the donor retention rate is nationally? It's like 46%. It's so low. And here's the problem. If you were the manager of a retail outlet and you had a 46% customer return rate, they probably would move you along. That would be so bad. What matters to retail, whether it's Nordstrom or Macy's or Albertsons or Vaughn's or whatever the supermarket is customer loyalty. And they instill it in their employees so well. The key to donor retention, to driving up that number beyond 46%, is to make donors feel important and valued to your organization. Excuse me. Here are some ways to do that. The first thing to do is to build how you build loyalty and retention is to think like a donor. Get in their mind. And you know how the best way to think like a donor is? To be a donor. be a donor at whatever giving level you can afford to your own organization. Because when you become a donor, you no longer have to wonder what it feels like to give a gift. Your own, what's in it for me as a donor, what your donors are feeling. That's what they want to know. What's in it for them? And that's what they are feeling. Becoming a donor to your cause, your work will impress your prospects. I once had a site visit at a capital campaign for a $10 million gift from a foundation. And the first and only question he asked me as the chief development officer was, what percentage of your board has made a gift to this capital campaign? And what kind of employee giving model do you have for the capital campaign? Donors, when you can say to a donor, join me in making a gift to this organization, that is such a powerful tool. When we talk about volunteers as fundraisers, we always say they must make a gift before they can go out and solicit a gift in a peer-to-peer setting. It's really important. The other thing that's really important is get to know them. The way you want to think like a donor is to get to know them, and not just through making a follow-up call to say thank you. One of the best questions I would ever ask a donor after they made a significant gift is, what do you want to accomplish with your gift? I was the planned giving manager for an organization. And when people would call me up and say, I want to include your charity in our bequests, in our planned gifts, in our estate plans, etc., the first question I would ask them in a sit-down situation is, one, have you told your family that you plan to leave some portion of your estate to us? And the second question I would ask them is, what do you want to accomplish with your gift? It's a powerful question, and it gets you to know them, which is this second point. You know, donors are confronted daily. Look in your mailbox. You get letters every day asking for a gift. Your goal should be to position your organization competitively with those other organizations who are looking for a gift. How do you do that? You monitor them. You look at what they're doing. You get to know them, how they approach donors. I worked in healthcare. There are a lot of hospitals in the same service area in Los Angeles where I worked, or in the Bay Area where I work. I would look at what those other hospitals were doing on their website, in their newsletters, in their direct mail campaign. And another thing that I would do is I would meet with their directors. That question I got from that program officer about $10 million, I knew that she was going to ask me that question. You know how I knew? I called up another hospital, a peer of mine, and I said to them, what did they ask you when they came for a site visit? And she told me what the program officer had asked her, so I could anticipate the questions that I was going to get. The questions for me as the chief development officer in that capital campaign were only about donors. Then she went on to ask the CEO about the level of care or whatever they were going to do going forward. Remember, excuse me. Remember to go the extra mile. Be willing to give your donors more than they demand and far more than they expect. Give them more than they demand and far more than what they expect. Act from the desire to serve and not from the desire to just gain a gift. When you make this your policy, you will do whatever it takes and whatever you must do to make service your number one priority. Say thank you like you mean it. Some organizations do not even send out thank you letters. I'm going to give you an example. I once worked with a community foundation. I'm not going to name them because I don't want to embarrass them. But they followed strictly the IRS guideline. The IRS guideline about thank you notes is that you must acknowledge a gift of $250 or more. And I remember talking to one of their stewardship people, and I said, I know some donors who made gifts of $50 and they never received thank you letters. And she told me, well, the IRS only requires us to acknowledge a letter of for a gift of $250 or more. That's not good stewardship, guys. It's just the opposite. Your donors are not expecting to see their names in lights or in the sky above their homes. They just want a warm, personalized letter or card that congratulates them for their contributions. It's such an important. And remember, don't send dear friend letters as thank you letters. Not, first of all, as you probably guess, I have millions of friends. I have that kind of personality that just brings friends to me, okay? Don't send me a dear friend letter because I don't want to be your friend. I want to be your donor, and I want a thank you letter as a donor, okay? So here are some things. Make it personal. We like to say that the 4 Ps. There are 4 Ps for donor letters. Be prompt, and many of you are very prompt. Within 24 hours, love it. You're a success. That's not a fail, that's a success. Make it personalized. Dear Jack, dear Mr. Alato, dear Mrs. Wu, dear Ms. Martin, whatever their titles are, make sure you get that down and personalize it. Be passionate. Warmly convey gratitude and explain how the funds will be used as they instructed you to, based on their passion, and have those one of the most effective things we do in our webinar on cost selling and case for support. One of the things that we say the most powerful tool we have, whether it's thanking and stewardship or creating a case for support or anywhere on that fundraising cycle, is telling stories. Telling stories are so important in thank you letters. The most effective fundraising letter I ever sent in my career was written by a police officer who was shot 4 times and came to our emergency room and spent 12 weeks in our hospital for his care. And he wrote the letter. I fixed it up a little bit, sent it out as our direct mail campaign. He told his story, and it was beautiful, and it raised a lot of money. So personal stories. And then our thank you letters were also from him, telling about his happy ending at the hospital. It's really important. So that's the passionate part of your thank you letter. Finally, be positive. Make your donors smile. Feel glad they gave and feel proud of the organization and their contribution to your organization. Here's a point that I love to say: treat every donor like a major donor. Do you know why? Because they think they're major donors. If the maximum gift they could give to you is $25, then they're a major donor. It's not about your number, it's about them. That's donor centric. Treat them all like major donors because they think they are major donors. And every single donor wants to be treated like a major donor. Here's something that I recently read in another book. When donors come to you through your annual campaign, that annual fundraising letter that we all send out every year, they're testing you. Major donors are testing you. They're testing you for the promptness, the passion that you bring, how you treat them, your stewardship. And if you want to get a major gift from them down the road, and you may not know they're capable of making a big gift, they're testing you. Make sure you pass the test. Every donor wants to be treated and thinks of themselves as a major donor. So think like a donor, say thank you like you mean it, and treat everyone like a major donor. The 4 Ps are: be prompt, personalize your letter, be passionate, and be positive. Remember, guys, everyone has fundraising fails. It's inevitable. And our job is to learn from those fundraising fails and to be better at fundraising. I think we in our profession, we always talk about what we should do as fundraisers. These two presentations were about things that we did that didn't work. People always write in these books, and trust me, I have a ton of them behind me, about what to do to be a good fundraiser. Hopefully these told you some things that help you even be better fundraisers based upon what you didn't do. So remember, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah right here because she knows that learning portal is awesome.
Yes, and I think that's a perfect segue, Jack. Thank you so much for going over our 10 epic fundraising fails and how to overcome them. We hope that you enjoyed this training and these two parts of the webinar. I think we'll also send out the link to go back and watch part 1 so you can get the epic fails numbers 1 through 5 as well. And so you can learn from our mistakes, and you can also become a better fundraiser. So that leads me right into our online learning portal. It is a no-cost resource from the Fundraising Academy. I'm going to pop the link in the chat right here that you can sign up. It takes less than 60 seconds just to go on there, create a profile at no cost to you, and dive into all these resources. So Jack has alluded to a couple of these. We have tools in there to help you with prospecting. We have additional note cards in there to help you figure out needs discovery. We've got sample donor questions that can help you prepare for your donor visits. We've even got different worksheets in our online learning portal that you can understand to figure out your presentation style, how to qualify folks with the Madden test. Lots of wonderful resources there, all at your disposal. So definitely we want you to check that out and be really a part of our community. We talked a lot in Jack's presentation about, for example, even Ray mentions it in the chat, adding join me into my presentations immediately. It's really great to get you as a fundraiser into the shoes of being a donor, thinking like a donor. Thinking like a donor is easy when you're also a donor to your organization. So you can get that experience and also really use that talking point as a way to build community. I know that I'm sure that all of you here are with wonderful, worthy organizations with great causes. And why not support that by really drawing your donors into the fold, sustaining that donor loyalty, thinking really importantly about stewardship and how you can do those 4 Ps and really make sure that folks feel like a warm hug from your organization. So all of that and more accessible at our online learning portal.
Yeah. I want to just say, I know Sharon's going to send out the PowerPoint afterwards, but in January, we did this 10 epic fundraising fails for our webinar. So if you haven't had enough of me today, go, feel free to go. And to the online portal, download that January. Remember, all of the things that we do are CFRE continuing education credits. I want to thank my cohort. First, Sharon, thank you for having me. And my 2 examples that probably going to file complaints against me after this. But Faith, thank you. And Sarah, it's the Sarah, Jack, and Faith show. And of course, if you have any questions, you can send them to me. You connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email at that email address.
We're so glad to have you, Jack. And Jack is our fabulous trainer with Fundraising Academy. I am the program manager at Fundraising Academy, and Faith here on the call is our program coordinator. So the 3 of us are just thrilled, Sharon, that we were able to be here as part of SD Gives University. We're so grateful for this partnership and getting access to these wonderful folks in the chat who are now part of our community. So I hope that you all had a great time with our workshop. And I'll leave it off to Sharon with any closing thoughts.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. It was really a real pleasure, as it always is. And Jack, there's no way anybody could not like you. I think that is just not a possibility. So take that one off of one of your possible reasons for not getting that would just be crazy. So anyway, thank you, Sarah and Jack and Faith. Nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll get to work some more together later at some point. And really, Sarah, they said it all. We will share the slides, the recording. Great idea to, we'll also share out last week's as well. And happy to have you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all. Have a great
Have a
week.
good, okay, take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.